In my 20s, I rode Hondas, and I graduated from a 350 to a 450, and that's as big as I got. I went to California from Texas several times, um, and I was used to riding quite a bit, but um, I sold my cycles and didn't ride again sometime in my 30s, I guess. So it was only like 5 years, 7 years I rode. Um, but in my 40s, I bought a Harley. And that was a lot of motorcycle. They're very heavy, not very big. So I had to be very careful not to drop it. Um, and at some point, I'd been back from France for several years, and I was married to a woman who had 3 kids living in Austin. And I was attacked financially by um, one of my brothers, and we left town. We went to Missoula, Montana. And then my wife's ex-husband came to visit, and he wanted to go with his new French wife to France and take one of the children, and he wanted permission. And she said, the child, I'll go if Mom and David will go. So we all went. Um, and my wife had the bright idea to take um, one of the Harleys because she saw that from uh, Canada to Paris, I think it was Victoria, um, you could take your cycle free. We thought that was a genius idea. We would cycle around France, not spending very much money on gasoline. We wouldn't have to rent a car. Um, and we would have our transportation really, really hip. So that's what we did. And we went on Lufthansa, which landed in Frankfurt. And it, the Harley was on a pallet, and it had just enough gasoline in it to get us to the very first gas station we could find. We got instructions about how to get on the right autoroute, and we took off. Well, the first time we stopped and bought gas, I bought the wrong kind of gas. I didn't realize the green pumps meant diesel. And so we were putting out a lot of black smoke as soon as we drove out of there, and then it started to rain. So we definitely had some challenges right from the beginning. And we had jet lag. Um, so we headed to Strasbourg, and at that point, the borders were open between those countries. And so we didn't even have to be stopped by customs or anything. We just cycled right on into France. And then we started going south, but along the eastern side of France, just below Strasbourg, through Alsace, and then the Franche-Comté. And it rained a lot. That was something I'd forgotten about. Um, so we were always stopping under bridges, putting on our rain gear, and then taking it off later. And um, we also learned pretty quickly that the work I had done on the Harleys to increase the size of the cylinders made it noisier than was legal in France. So when we went through towns, people were holding their ears, but the other cyclists on the road who were mostly on B&Ws, and they zipped past us like we were standing still, but they were always very friendly. Um, so we got to a town called Ornon, and Cynthia was reading a guidebook, a British guidebook, that talked about a village that nobody knew about, that was very pretty and was actually the prettiest village in the whole east of France, and that it was very well known by the Swiss and Germans, but not by Americans. So we decided to go there, but we couldn't find the signs. We were cycling up and down in Ornon, um, and kept reading the instructions, and they said that in the middle of town there was a road that went straight to that village, but we could not locate it. And then I started to remember the way they do their signage in France. They tell you the larger town beyond, it's on the same route, but they don't put it on the sign, assuming everybody knows if you're going to Salins-les-Bains, you're going to have to go through Mont-sous-Sainte-Anne. Well, once I remembered that, we easily found the sign, and we we took that road, and it was a windy road that went up to a high plateau, and it was rather barren up there. There were a lot of farms. There were tiny little hamlets. Um, and then we went into a forest with that was quite cool. This was this was in June or July, so I didn't expect it to be that cool. But in any case, pretty soon we came upon a line of cars stopped, and we stopped because up ahead there was a horse in the road. And this was a very narrow little country road, 2 lanes, um, and cars were stopped on both sides of the horse. And everybody in front of us managed to turn around and go the other way. They knew a different route, and we didn't know that route. But in any case, pretty soon we were up number one in line and faced with this horse. Um, Having grown up in Texas with horses, I had I had some idea what kind of horse this was. This was not some high-spirited stallion who was probably going to bite you or kick you. This looked like a workhorse. And so I got off the cycle, took off my helmet, put the cycle on its stand, and went up to the horse and put my hand on his neck. He didn't flinch. He was very passive. He was very um, calm about the whole thing. And I took my belt off and put it around his neck and just led him off to the side of the road, parallel to the road, and left him there and went back to the cycle, got off, and started it. We started the cycle up, and then we left. And people on the other side, going the other direction, were very friendly to us. And as I went through, I glanced in the rearview mirror, and they were all checking out our Texas license plate. Anyway, we went on into the village. We were too late to eat lunch, but um, we decided to spend 3 or 4 days at the little country hotel there. And Isabel, the patroness of the hotel, made us sandwiches with baguettes and Comté cheese. And um, and we drank some wine I thought was very strange. And I realized that it is a very popular wine called Vin Jaune that that the kings used to love in the Middle Ages, and is grown in that area. And it at first, it to somebody who's not instructed in the kinds of food it goes with, will think that there's something drastically wrong with that wine. It just feels like it's gone bad or something. But later we learned what kind of food to put it with and realized that it's a delicacy. Uh, in any case, we settled into that hotel and got up on the third floor and just conked out. Um, we woke up in the morning pretty early because there was a strange noise going on out in the street or outside the windows. And we got up and looked out, and there was a whole herd of black cows traipsing past the hotel into the street. Cars were stopped. The cows pretty much knew where to go. They were going to a pasture down the down the street a ways, and there was a big black dog with short hair who made sure they stayed in line, and a young woman with a long stick who was behind them. So they were very well under control, but leaving their cow pies in the street, you know. But everybody in their cars knew the drill, and they basically just waited until the whole troop went by, and then they avoided the cow pies and went on their way. So we got up. We had a French breakfast with a cafe au lait and a baguette with confiture. And then we went out for a walk to see what kind of village it was. And it was about 150 people lived there. And it was in the mountains. So it had these drifting clouds that were kind of magical. And a lot of uh, kind of derelict houses. One kind of general store, um, but there was very little there. But anyway, we went out later in the morning and pretty close to lunchtime, I guess, because we walked past a house with a lot of young people sitting around pulling pizzas out of their oven. But this was um, an oven in the old style built into the wall that you cooked on with coals. Um, Now, they probably did have a gas stove somewhere in the house, but they used these old fireplaces. Um, and it in France, that's called a four pan, where they made bread, and um, it's a very traditional way to cook. So they were playing music, they were all chatting, and so we did get a feeling there's some life going on here. And not everybody is 90 years old, although there were quite a few old peasants there. In any case, we ended up buying a house and staying there for 20 years. Um, and we got integrated into the village. We got to know people. And it was an unusual village in a way because they had so many foreigners. There were like 7 or 8 different nationalities of people there. No Americans, or I think one French guy had married a young Canadian, so she was American ish. But everybody else was either German, Dutch, there were Russians, there were Italians, there were Swiss, in this tiny village. The reason those people were there was that that village had something magic about it, and it just attracted people. Um, that is how we got started. Although I had lived in Paris and I had been married to a French young woman and spoke French for 10 years, um, I didn't know that much about living in the French countryside, especially in a small village where things are very, very different. What I did learn was every region of France has its history, has its accent, has its foods, has its customs. Yeah, they're French, but they're French with a certain character, a certain special personality to it. And um, in the 22 years we were there, it became a beautiful place for us. The nature is really something. Um, just prodigious amount of water. There are rivers and rivulets and springs everywhere. It rains a lot. There are these huge forests. And in the Franche-Comté, they have their special diet. They have a cheese they make called Comté that is sought after. Um, you can buy all the other cheeses from the other regions of France. They're all available, but the best Comté with the right number of bells on the cover. Um, Aged Comté is a delicacy. It's really something, and that vin jaune is perfect with it. Anyway, I'm going to stop talking about that right now, and I will do another version of this, how it was to live there, next week.